Dragon Quest really means a lot to me. It's one of my favorite game series ever, and one I have a lot of history with. My family always loves to bring up me as a 5-year-old telling my older brother that he has to hand over his DS right now so I can play Dragon Quest IX. And when I did finally get my own DS, I got to benefit from his extremely overpowered 3 times revocated character showing up in my world and one-shotting every boss in the game. Now that was pretty awesome. The first time I ever went to GameStop, I had the chance to buy 2 used games, and I chose Dragon Quest VI and Dragon Quest Monsters Joker. And then one of the first games I bought for my Switch was Dragon Quest XI, which is still one of my favorite RPGs of all time. Outside of Joker, which kid me didn't play for more than like 3 hours, and 6, which was maybe a bit too confusing for me, these games won me over with their amazing pun-laden sense of humor and simple pick-up-and-play mechanics that hide a lot of depth. The enemy designs were awesome, the music memorable, the stories fun and lighthearted, the class systems interesting to play around with, and really there's just this all-encompassing sense of comfort and happiness that remains constant through every one of these games. So then, it's no surprise to me that Dragon Quest is so popular in Japan. It's the game that can't release on a weekday or the entire country will skip school and call in sick from work. From what I've heard, it's common to treat these games as a 30-minute daily rest activity that you come home to after a long workday. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. When I went to Japan for a week a year ago, I got myself a slime soap dispenser, because why not, slimes are awesome. So then, why have these games traditionally been far less popular in the West? I don't really get it. Just so I don't artificially extend the length of this video further than it already will be, I'll discuss that more as I get to the later games, since I'll have more to say there anyway. For today, we're talking about Dragon Quest I, the game that started it all. But this isn't just any old review. I'm going to play every version of this game that I can get my hands on. I mean, hey, it's a 12 to 15 hour RPG. That's literally nothing when you compare it to the dozens or hundreds of hours some of these games require nowadays. As a disclaimer though, I won't be covering any versions that were only released in Japan. I'm not about to have my video taken down if I can avoid it, so that means no mods or fan translations as per Square Enix content creator policy. I'll be treating that as a general stance for the foreseeable future, unless I hear otherwise. I will be bringing up some of the Japan-only versions for context, but I won't actually be playing them. So that means I'll be talking about the 4 North American releases: Dragon Warrior on the NES, Dragon Warrior 1 and 2 on Game Boy Color, Dragon Quest on mobile, which I'll be playing via the Switch version, and last year's Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remake. Which, I'll be honest, this video is mostly an excuse for me to finally play the HD 2D version. I'll be skipping the Famicom original, which only released in Japan, which does have a good number of differences from its NES counterpart. And I also won't be playing the Super Famicom remake, but that doesn't seem like too much of a loss considering both the GBC and Switch versions are heavily based on it. Before now, my only experience with the original trilogy is playing them on Switch like 5 years ago, and I did enjoy them all to various degrees. But I want to see everything these games have to offer. So, in part 1 we'll discuss the first 3 versions, before tackling the HD 2D remake in part 2. That's because I feel like the newest one deserves its own video. And, of course, more videos equals more views equals more subscribers equals profit. How well does Dragon Quest I begin one of the greatest and most important game series of all time? Which versions are the best and still hold up even 40 years later in 2026? Let's get started. We'll begin with the NES version called Dragon Warrior. It's the original, and the 3 versions we're talking about today are pretty faithful to it in a lot of ways. You are whoever you want. You begin in Tantagel Castle, where King Lorik has tasked you with defeating the Dragon Lord who has been wreaking havoc all over Alefgard. By the way, I totally thought it was Tantegel, but
Tantagel.
A dragon has captured Princess Gwaelin, so you should probably go save her as well. Minutes into your quest, you come across a cave which holds a tablet. It says you are a descendant of the legendary hero Erdrick, and there are 3 treasures hidden across the world that you'll need to find in order to get the Ball of Light and save the world. And that's about it. Considering this game is essentially the first JRPG ever made, the simplicity here makes sense and is actually pretty refreshing with how overly complex some RPG stories can get nowadays. But if you consider the fact that it came out less than a year after Super Mario Bros., the same year as games like the first Metroid, Castlevania, and Legend of Zelda, even this level of storytelling is actually pretty impressive for the time. Every NPC in every town has something different to say, and while not all of it is useful or funny or interesting, much of it is, and in my experience they're all still worth speaking to. In fact, you kinda have to anyways, because they're the only way you'll get any kind of direction in your adventure. The GBC version actually changes some things up in this regard. starting, the game takes you to an animated cutscene in which a giant dragon raids Tantagel Castle, kidnaps the princess, and steals the Ball of Light. Due to the retranslation, most characters now have different names. Erdrick is Loto, Gwaelin is Laura, and the Dragon Lord has been demoted to Draco Lord. Ew. Basically, all text and dialogue in the game has been updated as well, adding in some new jokes for NPCs to tell and some helpful hints and bits of story. Did you know? Yes. Oh. Sure, man. The Switch version, and yes, I'll just call it that since I am playing on Switch rather than mobile, doesn't have this opening cutscene, and the text is once again retranslated. The names of enemies and spells are much more in line with modern Dragon Quest. For instance, your first attack spell is literally just called Hurt on the NES, Fireball with one L on GBC, and Sizz on Switch. I absolutely love the modern spell naming scheme where Sizz turns into Sizzle, turns into Cussizz, turns into Cussizzle, but we'll have to wait for later games to see the higher variants anyway. And there's something so pure and unfiltered about your attack spells being called Hurt and Hurt More, or Heal and Heal More. Red slimes have been turned into she slimes on Switch, and magicians are now prestidigitators. The updated translation here does take some of the charm out of the Switch version's dialogue though, as everyone just speaks in basic old-style English. Not all that interesting. Aesthetically, Dragon Warrior is certainly an early NES game. In 2026, the graphics won't blow you away, but I do still like them more than I expected. The original Japanese version of this game from 1986 looks kind of rough, with the player character doing this infamous crab walk because there's only one sprite no matter which direction you're moving. So thankfully, the Western release gets a few updates thanks to releasing 3 years later in 1989. The highlight is of course the character and enemy designs, brought to life by the legendary Akira Toriyama. I mean, do I even have to introduce him? The artist behind Dragon Quest, Dragon Ball, Chrono Trigger, etc. And you'll never forget these designs. The first enemy you run into is the slime. A simple idea, but one so instantly recognizable and so full of life that it would set the tone for the entire series for 40 years now. I mean, how could you hate it? Look at that smile! Might I remind you of my soap dispenser? Wait, wrong image. There we go. It's simply perfect. The fact that the game starts you off with whimsical designs like the slime, the ghost, and the Draki only makes it more threatening later on when they get more serious. Like when we start exploring some dungeons and see a Druin. Still just a big bug, but it doesn't have a huge smile on its face. But imagine my surprise when I stumbled onto the lower continent and got attacked by a demon knight? Like, wait, no, get me out of here! Oh, thank God. But yeah, the enemy designs are easily the strongest part of the aesthetic to me. The battle sprites look amazing and convey a lot of personality, and they alone are enough to make going to a new area interesting and fun. I wouldn't say the rest of the game is a graphics powerhouse, but everything does the job just fine. The overworld is pretty static, but at least it's clear where you can and can't go and what does what. Same goes for the towns, but it's nice to see all the people walking around here. At least when they don't block you from moving. Dude, get out of the way, just let me in, I just want to buy an herb. Any day now. I will say I also love the animation for getting into a battle, how this backdrop kind of spirals out of the middle of the screen. That's fun. As for the sound, can I just say how much I adore the sound design in literally every Dragon Quest game ever, and that all started here. All the little sounds during battle are perfect, from using a spell to dealing damage to scoring an excellent move, no they aren't called critical hits yet, to even the sound of an enemy dodging. Even navigating the menus sounds fun somehow. But even better than that is the jingles. Staying at the inn, finishing a battle, leveling up, dying, everything is just perfect. This is one of those things where I don't mind that they reuse them in every game because they were just as good as they needed to begin with, and it adds a sense of familiarity to each subsequent game that's very much appreciated. Also of note is the music by composer Koichi Sugiyama. I won't go into any, real life stuff here, you can look that up yourself. I'll be sticking to how it plays out in game for now. And again, this is an early NES game. Every song is a 15-second loop, and there's only like 6 of them anyway. There's a song each for towns, the castle, the overworld dungeons and battles, and that's kinda it. There is thankfully a final boss theme too. Oh, and of course the overture, the main theme of Dragon Quest that's still being used today for good reason. That's definitely the best piece of music here, and I especially like the version that plays for the end credits. I think the music is mostly fine here otherwise, with the only real standout being how the dungeon theme gets lower pitched and more threatening as you go down each floor. Oh, and I love how your character's feet bounce along to the rhythm of the overworld music. That's just too specific and adorable of a detail for it to be unintentional. I don't love the battle theme though, it's just far too repetitive for how often you hear it, and it gets old really fast. So in the end, I'd call the music here fine enough. In the GBC remake though, these relatively simple pieces were updated to great effect. I honestly love what they did here. The town theme has been extended to what feels like 4 times its original length, and adds so many extra details to what was already a memorable melody. It now feels like an actual song. It's just awesome to listen to. Same goes for the overworld music, and the different floors of a dungeon now have slightly different compositions as well, instead of just lowering the pitch. Graphically, I would probably choose the GBC version as my favorite of the 3 in this video. The color palette has been updated and the dungeons look more interesting. Battles are still relatively static, but there are at least different animations for each weapon, which is cool. And the sprites here also look great. And I mean, I would absolutely not choose the Switch version, which is seriously one of the ugliest looking games I've ever played in my life. There are like 4 different art styles going on simultaneously, and every one of them clashes with the other. You have Super Nintendo looking backgrounds for every area, then smooth non-pixelated lines for battles and menus. Oh, and these awful character sprites that look like you literally copy and pasted an image from a totally different game without taking the resolution into account. Like, let's zoom in on that really quick. Just look at this, what even is that? I am far from a graphics snob, but that even throws me off. And then the map looks totally different from everything else as well. Well, hey, at least there is a map this time. That's nice. Seriously though, what were they thinking with this? I know this version was originally made for mobile phones, but that doesn't excuse the clashing art styles. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned the performance. I mean, just look at this frame rate. No, this isn't my footage acting up and being set to a low bitrate or something. This is how the game actually looks on a real-life Nintendo Switch 2. I have no idea what happened here, but man is this version rough graphically. This is weirdly one of those scenarios where the game might look even worse when playing it for yourself as opposed to looking at the footage, since my recording is causing the other games to look a bit less smooth than they actually are. I am not kidding that playing the Switch version on my monitor made me feel like I was having a hardware problem, and it literally hurt my eyes after a while. Well, at least the music is okay, being MIDI orchestra remixes of the original songs. I like that they used the updated compositions from the GBC version, but they're very clearly low quality MIDIs, and I'll never ever understand why Dragon Quest has been stuck with those for so long. I wouldn't expect anything else for a mobile port like this, but even the initial release of Dragon Quest XI had MIDI music for some godforsaken reason. In the year 2017. The same year as Xenoblade Chronicles 2, by the way. So yeah, I'm glad I played the definitive edition instead. Those songs are just infinitely better when played by a real orchestra. But now let's finally get to the gameplay. To really drive home how old this game is, back in the day Dragon Warrior was considered to have a very simple, easily understandable user interface. And the interface in question? This thing right here. You have 8 menu options at all times outside of battle. Talk, spell, status, item, search, stairs, door, and take. That's right, there's no context-sensitive A button or anything like that. To take any action at all, a menu is involved. In the Famicom original, you have to choose both an action and direction from the menu, so thank God they fixed that in the Western release. Yeah, you can't actually just face an NPC there, you have to select talk and then up. Yikes. You can only hold one weapon and one piece of armor at a time on NES. How do you change it? Just buy a new one, selling your old one in the process. Every single door in the game is locked by a magic key, but when you use one of these keys, it's now gone, so it's one key for one door. You'll have to buy more if you run out, and thankfully you can hold 6 at a time, but if you leave the area you're currently in, all the doors respawn, so that's kind of annoying. Same goes for torches, which are single-use items that light up one dungeon or cave very slightly, one time. Thankfully these get replaced by the Radiant spell a few hours in. Want to save your game? Walk back to the very first room in the very first town where you started and talk to the king. That's literally the only way. No churches, no campfires, no quick saves. And that's already an improvement from the Famicom where you have to input a password. Thank God I'm not playing that one. And until you unlock the return spell at level 13 or so, by the way I ended the game at level 21 for reference, there is no fast travel of any kind. And unlike Zoom in the later games, you can't choose any town to warp to. It's only Tantagel Castle. So I hope you like walking everywhere because that's what you'll be doing 98% of the time. This whole system is very dated in 2026, and I was worried it would be a huge hindrance to my enjoyment of the game. But, you know, most of the time it wasn't. I mean, sure, if you put this UI in a modern RPG, it would be hell on earth to deal with. But Dragon Warrior is a 12-hour game, 15 at most, and the way you play it is also exceedingly simple by today's standards, so it's actually totally fine. There are certainly some major annoyances, and I do mean major, but the basics are solid at least. So here's the general gameplay loop. You start at Tantagel Castle since that's the only place you can save. You walk out as far as you're able to go, either to a new town, dungeon, or just to explore or do some grinding. Those are basically the only 4 things you do in this game after all, but I'd say grinding is by far the majority of what you do, like 80% of the total runtime. The world may be big for an early NES game, but it's still very small by the standards of any other RPG ever made. So because of that, you're primarily limited by either your level or your current gear. There's basically nothing in the way of scripted story events or cutscenes. The only way you'll know where to go is by talking to every NPC in every town and picking up clues that way, or by walking to a new location and a higher level enemy pressing the delete button on you. So in a sense, progression is strictly tied to gameplay. In a genre that would come to be known for sprawling stories with unending cutscenes and dialogue, and requiring dozens if not hundreds of hours of your time, the focus on gameplay is once again pretty refreshing. At the very start of the game, you can only move in a tiny area around Tantagel. You get just enough money from the king to get both a weapon and armor, but not the best version of both. You can either get a club and some plain clothes, or a literal bamboo stick and some leather armor. The choice is yours. I, being the aggressive type of player whose main goal is to smack every enemy in the face, chose the club of course. But I still think this is a really cool idea and a fun little chunk of interactivity. Once you have your choice of gear, you can go out and fight slimes, red slimes, and drakis. If you go out too far, you're practically guaranteed to die, so now your goal is to stay around here and kill enemies to gain experience and eventually level up. At level 2, most of your stats nearly double and the difference is striking. Now slimes pose no challenge, but you're still nowhere near powerful enough to set off into the world. So we defeat more and more enemies, eventually getting to level 3 where we unlock spells, beginning with heal, which does exactly what it says. Now your survivability is significantly improved, but still not enough. Killing enemies also gives you gold, so now we have to beat enough of them to get more powerful weapons or armor. And once you do, you're finally able to set out on your adventure. As you continue to grow in power, you unlock more locations that you can get to without dying on the way. But remember, you have to be able to get back to Tantagel to save, and get to any town to use an inn and fully restore your health and magic points. And this is essentially how the whole game plays out. Sure, the complexity increases a bit as the game goes on, but at all times you'll be grinding experience to level up and grinding gold to get new gear. This really is just grinding the video game. So your ability to tolerate what Dragon Warrior throws at you really boils down to patience, and that's about it. There is an element of strategy involved, as you do need to choose carefully how far you're willing to go out based on your current abilities, whether to attack, heal, or inflict a status condition like sleep or stopping spells in battle, whether to use items or save them for later, where you want to go next, etc. And there's also an element of luck, which is used sparingly enough to spice up the whole experience without leaving you feeling like the numbers are out to get you. Well, most of the time anyway. Encountering enemies, the amount of damage any attack does, if it's dodged or not, the effectiveness of spells and items, what an enemy does on any given turn, they're all randomized within a certain range based on your and the enemy's stats. And I think this is brilliant. Sure, this is originally from the tabletop RPGs that inspired Dragon Quest, but they didn't have to add it, you know? And the implementation is great. Battles can be somewhat unpredictable in the short term, but a full session of grinding is largely predictable. It does feel bad to die because your attack missed, but after the first time this happens you'll play more carefully because you know that's always a possibility. But hey, maybe that won't happen. There's always the opportunity to test your luck and go just a bit further than feels safe. But that of course is up to the player, and I love it. What I don't love is when I get into a battle and the enemy gets a rare chance to attack first, then they send me to sleep, which happens to have the rare chance of sending me to sleep for 3 or more turns, meaning I get wiped out before having the chance to do any action at all. This is incredibly rare, but still did happen to me once. And yeah, I'll be honest, it was pretty hilarious. When it's just one time, it's more funny than actually infuriating. And in this game, unlike some later games, dying doesn't make you lose experience, just half your gold. So not that big a deal most of the time. However, outside of all that, the actual tasks you have to complete in this game are quite repetitive and do test your patience. And as you've no doubt seen by now in the footage, there are no party members. Every battle is you, the single player character, versus one enemy, and that's it. Because of this, the complexity can't ever get very high, and you really are just doing the exact same thing repeatedly through the whole 12 to 15 hour runtime. I'll just say there's definitely a reason I've never seen another RPG use this system. In today's world, it feels simple to a fault, and sometimes feels like you're not playing Dragon Quest, but Drag On Quest. Or maybe your quest is Dragon. If you've watched some of my other reviews, I often complain about slow pacing in games where I don't feel it has a purpose. I had an issue with this in Mega Man 4 and 7, and especially Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance, but I won't go back down that rabbit hole right now. So I should really hate the idea of a game based totally around exceedingly simple grinding, but no, at least not by default. I think the slow pace here is definitely intentional, and works well for what it is. There are some big issues we'll get into later, but most of the game is like this. Have you ever played one of these mining games? You know the ones I'm talking about. You go underground, grab as many resources as you can, and bring them back to the surface to upgrade your mining ability. Then you can last for longer and get even more resources. And repeat. I played this Flash game, Mega Miner, I think it was called, all the time when I was like 9 or something. Dragon Warrior 1 to me is basically the same thing. It's a mining game. This is a very simple but effective enough gameplay loop, and if you're gonna make me grind, I think this is a fine way to do it. Because modern RPGs are so long, you often get to level up all the way to 99 or more. That means you have a very gradual increase in power. It can be really fun, and some RPGs are awesome of course, but it often means you don't get to clearly see the effect of each specific stat increase. Here, leveling up one time is often the difference that gets you into a dungeon or a new continent. It feels amazing to level up or get enough gold to buy one piece of gear. So while you do have to put in a lot of work with the grinding, the results are undeniably worth it, and that's pretty cool. So while I do like Dragon Warrior more than I expected, it's certainly not free from problems. First of all, I think there are a few moments that are a bit confusing. Look, it's not Zelda 1 or Simon's Quest. There were only 2 moments I got confused enough to consider using a guide. I've played games released over 20 years later that are more unnecessarily cryptic than this one. That's legitimately impressive for the time, and I really appreciate them taking the time to translate everything properly and add in enough hints for what you have to do. But I think they still did miss a few things. For one, there's this moment here. When you get to the forest town of Cole, you can find someone saying that they sell magic keys in Rimeldar. Well, there are a ton of locked doors in every town in the game, so that seems like the next important location to me. But we don't know where it is. Other NPCs across the world continue to hype up just how strong you'll have to be to go to the southern island. Okay, well I went to the southwest area and... yeah, they were definitely right. The only place left to go is this one cave south of Cole, annoyingly behind a bunch of poison that damages you. I go in there, go down slightly to the right, and run into a green dragon. Well, clearly that was incorrect, but there's nowhere else to go outside of here in the southwest. So I go back to the southwest to do some grinding, but the enemies are just way too strong. Something feels off. I wander around for 20 minutes and decide to go back to the Green Dragon cave. Walk through to the bottom and... oh. It seems that the Green Dragon only spawns on a specific square on the right side of the cave, although there isn't any indication of this. This is actually the way to Rimeldar, which gets you the magic keys and is the only way forward to the next dungeon, the Grave of Garenham. I feel like this was a bit confusing, like maybe there should have been a sprite showing you the Green Dragon rather than just spawning in and demolishing you. Oh, yeah, like that, exactly. It definitely made me not want to come back to that cave, and I only vaguely remembered the solution because of my playthrough on the Switch version 6 years ago. A similar moment comes right at the very end in the Dragon Lord's castle. Spoilers, I suppose. Skip to the timestamp here if you want, but for this game there's not too much to worry about. Once you get all 3 treasures and make it to the shrine south of Rimeldar, you get the rainbow drop. You're supposed to figure out you can just use it on the tile right next to the 1 tile gap between these 2 islands, forming a rainbow bridge you can cross to enter the final dungeon. From here, once you enter the castle, you can go into one of 2 routes into the lower floor, but they don't actually lead anywhere, so that was pretty useless. In fact, the only way forward is to go behind the throne and check the floor, revealing some hidden stairs that actually let you progress. I think the only hint you actually get for this is one NPC who says Erdrick entered the darkness from a secret passage in the Dragon Lord's lair. That's it. So yeah, I was extremely confused and had to look it up to progress. This is pretty unfortunate since, it's the final dungeon, and now there's a very good chance you're stuck. I don't know, maybe I missed another NPC hint somewhere, but only one of the 3 versions mentioned the actual location you're supposed to go to, and I was talking to literally everyone in every town at least once. So yeah, that kinda sucked. Thankfully, the silver lining in the NES version is that the confusion does mean you'll be grinding the whole time, which is very necessary to actually beat the game. I got here at level 17 and was only able to beat the Dragon Lord at level 21. So yeah, you have your work cut out for you. They actually disable a lot of RNG mechanics on the final boss as well, like removing critical hits and making offensive spells ineffective. So you really do need to do all that grinding. And by the way, let's talk about that. While I don't automatically have an issue with grinding as the main focus of the game, there's one instance where I think it's handled poorly to the extreme, namely the lead up to Cantlin. This is the final town in the game before the Dragon Lord's castle, and actually getting there is frankly one of the least fun things I've ever done in any game. I was at level 13 and getting absolutely demolished by every enemy on the way to the town, so I really had no choice but to grind. And level 15 takes 2,500 experience to reach from 14, which itself takes 2,000 to get to from 13, and I had to do this to stand a chance at all. So how long did it take? 50 minutes. Yes, nearly an hour, for just one of those 2 levels, and the other one took a similar amount of time, meaning I spent an hour and a half just sitting in one little specific corner, doing nothing at all except walking around in circles, battling enemies as they show up. Each enemy here gives you between 15 and 25 experience, meaning you have to kill somewhere on the order of 125 enemies for one level. Sure, I could go to the lower continent to fight enemies that give me over 30 experience, but they can easily kill me, sometimes from full health, which means spending 3 more minutes returning to Tantagel, saving and healing, then walking all the way back. The only other option is to run away from every battle and just hope you don't die on the way to Cantlin, but then you'll have to take down the golem guarding the town anyway, which might kill you in 1 to 2 hits, even if you do have the fairy flute to send it to sleep. I'm sure it's possible, but I was not willing to try and potentially extend my playtime even further than it already was. I just really don't understand why they had to make the requirements for level 14 and 15 so insane. Once you actually get into Cantlin, enemies consistently give 40 to 50 experience each for the rest of the game, and even more in the final dungeon, whereas the level up requirements stay at a steady 3,000 experience up until the very end, and again I beat the game at level 21. So counterintuitively, you have to beat significantly fewer enemies to level up as the game goes on, leaving this one moment in the middle of the game as a boring, painfully drawn out dumpster fire of a grindfest. It's about as engaging as driving around the desert in Metroid Prime 4, smashing green crystals for 30 minutes. Because again, you only have one character versus one enemy, so there is no strategy outside of mashing the attack button and healing when necessary, or maybe occasionally stopping an enemy's spells, which also means there's basically no variation in what you're doing during that time. Yes, I know I'm spending a while talking about this, but if you really want to feel the boredom I went through, just take this section of the video and loop it back to back 30 times in a row. At least once you finally reach Cantlin, not only does the grinding go faster, but you also have super powerful weapons and armor to grind for. So you're accomplishing 2 tasks at once, which feels significantly better, on top of the reduced level up requirements. And hey, by this point I realized I could just watch some Star Trek while grinding to pass the time. So obviously things improved from here. But that was easily the low point of the entire game, and it really felt like a complete waste of my time. Something I never want to do again for the rest of my life. And, speaking of that, time to play the game 2 more times. How do the remakes fare on the gameplay side of things? Do they fix that horrible Cantlin grind? While I wasn't particularly hampered by the NES UI, the improvements in the remakes are still extremely welcome. The GBC version updates everything to be more in line with where the series was in the year 2000. You can just press one button to talk to someone, open a chest, unlock a door, etc. And of course this improves the game feel significantly. Your inventory is able to hold older weapons as well, they aren't just sold automatically when buying a new one. Although, to be fair, there isn't much of any real reason to hold on to them anyway. And in fact, they actually do kind of clutter up the very limited inventory space here, since equipped weapons now take up a slot as well. But this and the slightly smaller screen showing you less of the world are probably the only negatives I can even think of. Honestly, the Game Boy Color version kind of blew me away, and I was not at all prepared for that. So let's go through the long list of positive changes, starting with the smaller stuff. Number 1, quick saves. If you need to end your current session but aren't ready to walk back to Tantagel, you can make what's essentially a save state and come back later. Very useful. Number 2, towns have been redesigned to have more interesting layouts, including multiple floors for some buildings. Everything feels more compact and it makes it more fun to walk around and do stuff. Number 3, there's a bank where you can store gold or items. I didn't use it very often, but still nice to have. But now for the big stuff. By far the most important is the number tweaks, which alone elevate this game from a cool relic of the past to a genuinely fun experience I can recommend to anyone. Yes, it seriously is that simple. From the very first battle you'll see what I mean. Red slimes have gone from giving you 1 experience and 2 gold, to 2 experience and 4 gold. And that's just the beginning. Remember those annoying enemies on the path to Cantland that gave you barely anything despite being your only grinding option? Well, now they actually feel worthwhile to fight. For instance, a rogue scorpion has gone from giving you 26 experience and around 100 gold to 70 experience and 110 gold. That's nearly triple the original amount. A gold man has gone from giving you around 160 gold to literally 650. And while the prices of items in the shop and the level up experience requirements have been shifted around a tiny bit, they're mostly the same. So yes, this does mean that you effectively have to fight only a third of the enemies that you used to for the same result. And thank God for that. But they didn't even stop there. The 2 boss enemies, the green dragon guarding the princess and the golem in front of Cantland, yeah, those 2 bosses have been buffed to be more difficult than the normal enemies, but as a result they upped the amount of experience they give you as well. Beating the golem gives you, wait, 2,500 experience? 2,500? Literally more than an entire level at this point. That's 1/20th of the game done right there. So yeah, the grinding issue has been completely done away with in just a few small changes. This is still essentially grinding the video game of course, but the pacing has gone from frustratingly sluggish to surprisingly quick and energetic. Rather than painfully sitting through battle after battle to just be able to get to the next town at all, now you get to waltz in like a one-man army, taking everything down without much fuss. You'll do most of the grinding you need to through your exploration of the overworld and dungeons that you're already going to do anyway. Now this I imagine could be contentious for fans of the original because, yeah, Dragon Warrior 1 on GBC is a significantly easier game as a result. In fact, it's one of the easiest RPGs I've ever played. I don't really think of the NES version as a super difficult game or anything like that, but it's definitely not easy. You do have to plan out how deep into a dungeon you can go without saving, how to make the most of your MP, etc. Enemies can definitely demolish you if you aren't prepared. By contrast, battles on Game Boy are basically a button simulator. Most enemy stats have been toned way down and yours way up. Now you actually increase your own defense through leveling up, which didn't happen in the original, and you just do so much more damage at every stage of the game. I essentially never had to use spells for any reason, as my basic attack alone was always enough, even when I ventured into locations I wasn't supposed to be in yet. What about healing? Nope, just beat the enemy up, which is practically guaranteed to let you win, then heal afterwards. Well, at least until the final dungeon. Status effects and damaging spells pale in comparison to mashing the A button until they die. Oh, and also this version adds seeds that you can find through exploring the towns and dungeons, which permanently increase your stats even more. Which, by the way, also makes exploring way more satisfying. So yeah, basically all of the strategy and challenge from the original has flown out the window. But I honestly don't care, because this version is just so much more fun and rewarding to actually play. Another contributing factor is the text speed. Every version of this game actually gives you an option to set your own text speed, which is really nice, and it's pretty fast in all of the versions if you choose the maximum, which of course I did. But on GBC, My god, you can barely even see some of this text before it flies by. It feels like I'm playing the game in fast motion with a cheat code, and that is exactly what this game needed. Battles are over in no time, further speeding up the pace and making me actually want to grind, which I didn't even think possible for this game. I'm not even kidding that I never had a dedicated grinding session in this game that took more than 10 minutes, compared to an hour and a half in the original. The combination of easier battles, much higher rewards for winning them, and the blisteringly fast text speed makes the pace of the whole game an absolute breeze. And seriously, I love it so much. Rather than a hard-fought adventure where you have to struggle to eventually get to that next level and unlock more of the world, this time you're dropped into a world that clearly isn't ready for you. It feels like you're breaking the game at all times. While I would definitely understand if you prefer the challenge of the original, these changes are enough for me to recommend Dragon Warrior on GBC far and away above the NES version to newcomers. Oh, but wait, we aren't even done. The dungeons have been redesigned to some extent, and I really like what they did here. They've expanded the layout to double its size, where rather than claustrophobic one-tile passages, most of them are 2 tiles wide. This does a good job of making the scale feel bigger, even when you're exploring the exact same layout. I think it works great for Garen's grave, although I do think it makes the Dragon Lord's castle just a tiny bit less fun to explore. I might prefer the original here. Well, at least if you don't consider the battles, but you know, there you go. But more importantly to me, the game's optional dungeon Craggy Cave has had its level design completely changed, and it's so much more interesting to explore. There are some amazing rewards in here too, like the Iron Shield, which is the best shield you can get at this point, saving you the grind of having to buy it. And there's also lots of gold and a bunch of seeds to increase your stats. A very nice addition to an already stacked remake. And yeah, that about wraps it up for the Game Boy version. This game honestly surprised me with just how much fun I was having. Is it perfect? No, definitely not. It's one of the most baby easy games I've ever played, and I think the final confusing moment of the original where you have to discover the stairs in the final dungeon hasn't been hinted at any better than before. But I mean, it's cut down the runtime from around 15 to just 7 or 8 hours, which is an absolutely insane thing for a remake to do, but I think it works extremely well. It retains a lot of what made the original a genre-starting experience, while updating it for modern audiences. Sure, maybe I'm only praising it this much because it was a breath of fresh air after the NES version, but that's what making a video like this will do to you. I wouldn't call it one of my favorite RPGs of all time or anything like that, but I would absolutely recommend any Dragon Quest fans play it, and I'm really glad I did. Well, for our final order of business, how about the Switch version? Well, it's basically the same as on GBC. The number tweaks, updated dungeons, and every other improvement do carry over, so the differences are relatively minor. For the positives, hidden items are now marked with glowing spots on the ground or exclamation point markers. This means you actually don't need a hint to find the fairy flute and get to the golem, which is pretty funny since that was barely even a puzzle to begin with. Same goes for Erdrick's armor in Damdara, and the mark of Erdrick near Cantlin, but most importantly, the puzzle in the Dragon Lord's castle is made far less confusing. So you're essentially guaranteed to figure this out on your own, and I really appreciate that. In my opinion, this puzzle did nothing but make the game worse, so I'm very happy to see it gone. I can't exactly blame the original for it too much, considering it's still much less cryptic than many other games at the time of release, and honestly even decades afterwards, but this is still unquestionably an improvement. Also, your movement speed has been slightly increased thanks to the wider field of view, which is nice. It does feel pretty noticeable after playing all these versions back to back at least. And items and spells now have descriptions that explain what they do, which is a nice quality of life addition. But these changes do unfortunately come with some issues. The most annoying of these is that finishing a battle gets you stuck in like a full second or two of menu lag, which offsets the quick text speed to make battles feel slower than before. It sounds like a nitpick, but may I remind you that this is grinding the video game. Battles are most of what you'll be doing, so this does add up to slow down the pace over time. The menu lag also happens after using a field spell, and I guess that's it? There aren't really any other changes I could mention. I don't know, in a review I feel like the Switch version almost comes off as better than it actually is. The changes are mostly positive, but I don't know, it just feels off somehow. It's probably just the criminally ugly art style and terrible performance mixed with the constant annoying menu lag, so I personally don't like it as much as the GBC version, but even then I can't deny that it's the most accessible of the three by far, both in terms of communicating where the player needs to go, and just being easily available on modern platforms. So it is probably the best version to start with if you've never played Dragon Quest 1, well, you know, HD 2D not included. So I definitely, easily prefer this over the original at least. Not sure how many people would agree, but to me it's the more pleasant experience by a long shot. While I do really appreciate the original's place in history and have a ton of respect for it, maybe I'm just too young to really have a ton of fun with it. So that's it for part 1. None of these three versions of Dragon Quest I are anywhere near the best in the series, nor are they included in my favorite RPGs of all time, but I think they're all worth playing on their own merits. In part 2, we'll finish up our discussion of Dragon Quest I once and for all by talking about the 2025 HD 2D remake. I'm very excited to finally play a Dragon Quest game released after 11 because, well, looks like 12 isn't happening anytime soon. Anyway, make sure to subscribe if you're interested in watching part 2 so you can find that one more easily. See you then, and thanks for watching.